You guys are gonna have to forgive me a little bit if my voice gives out on this one. I'm a little sick, but that's not stopping me from coming out here and vlogging because I am dedicated and I love you guys. And I want to share with you guys something that is hands down the funniest thing that has ever happened to me.
The date was June 1st, 2011, and it was approximately 7:30 a.m., and I was just sleeping on my bed. Oh, look at me, I'm so cute.
And I hear this pounding off in the distance, and it's 7:30 in the morning. I'm tired. I don't give a crap about pounding, but I wake up and I hear this pounding noise. It sounds like someone's like shingling their roof, but whatever. I'm like, I go back to bed, and then I hear the pounding again. Only this time it's closer, and I'm getting slightly concerned at this point because I'm hearing this pounding. I've been hearing it for like 10 minutes, and I'm still trying to sleep. But I'm getting a little concerned because it's getting closer. But once again, it's 7:30 in the morning. I'm tired. I go back to bed. And then eventually there's just this silence. And then all of a sudden, right on the window above my bed, I just hear a doosh, doosh, doosh. And I freak out, alright? I fly out of my bed, and I'm like, ah!
And I get up, and there's this dark, luminous shadow just lurking beyond my window.
And at this point, there's two thoughts going through my head. This could be A, someone who hurt himself shingling his roof and was desperately trying to get help, or B, this was some raging crackhead just going on some crack frenzy. And it turns out I was actually kind of close on the second one.
My ex-girlfriend's dad was standing beyond the window looking incredibly pissed off. But for some reason, I always remember him wearing sunglasses and foaming rapidly at the mouth.
So he stands there looking at me for a second with just this look of pure hatred on his face, and then both his hands shoot up in a one-finger salute, and he points at the glass right at me, and he goes, "You motherfucker!" Only he finishes the word. And then I look at him, and I'm just like, "It's nice to see you too, Mr. Anonymous." And he points at me again, and he's like, "Come outside right now. We're gonna have a little talk, you and I." And I am completely dazed. I had just woken up 30 seconds earlier, and I'm completely baffled. I have no idea what's going on, and I'm just sitting there in a t-shirt and my boxers, okay? And I'm just like, I look at him and I say the only thing I know how to say at that point. And I'm just like, no. Go outside, that's a terrible idea. And I told him, I'm just like, no. And he rears his head back and he just howls off like 30 different cuss words. And he points at me and he keeps calling me a mother effer and all these other swear words. And during this, my phone starts vibrating. And I pick it up, I look at it, and it's my dad. And I'm like, thank you. And I go to the window, I'm like, if you'll excuse me for a moment. And I pick up the phone and I'm like, Dad! Dad! And he's like, hey Jason, what's up? I'm like, Dad! Mr. Anonymous is outside my window and he is very pissed off. And my dad's like, oh yeah, I was wondering if you could do a few chores for me. I need you to vacuum and sweep the floor. And I'm like, Dad! He's like, what? Like, Mr. Anonymous is outside and he is very pissed off. He's like, Mr. Anonymous? What does he want? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, what do I do? He's like, well, if you have to, call the cops. And I didn't want to call the cops. I wanted to kind of see this through. I wanted to find out what this is about. And I thought it was a little too early to call the cops. So I'm like, no, I'll see if I can get him to go away. And I hang up the phone. And I go back to the window. And I don't even think this dude realized I left. He's still sitting there, reeling off cuss words at the window. And I'm like, all right, you want to talk? Go up to my front door, and we'll have a little talk. So I go around my floor, and I throw on some shorts, and I head upstairs with my phone still in hand. I have like 911 pre-dialed, and I'm ready to go if the need be. And I go upstairs.
And I start walking down my hallway towards the door, and I can see him beyond the door. And he's just pacing back and forth really angrily, just waiting for me to come to the door. Then eventually he just cups his hands around his eyes and just watches me.
And I go up to the door, and he's like, all right, now come outside. And I was still like, no, that's not happening. And he points at the window and he's like, you are a fucking coward. And I was like, nah, not really. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people who wouldn't let you in. And I finally asked him, like, what is this about? He's like, oh, BS, you know what this is about. You've been duct taping air horns and throwing them in my yard and taking toilet paper and throwing them all over my house. Do you feel like a man, Jason? Do you feel like a man harassing a 15-year-old girl? And I was like, harassment? Whoa, like TPing toilet paper? What? And I realized, yeah, they got toilet paper. I'm like, but what do I have to do with this? And I'm like, oh crap, he thinks I did it. And I'll give him credit, because it is true that I did 3 months earlier take an air horn, duct tape it, and throw it in their yard as kind of a friendly prank. And I had already confessed that to their daughter upon talking to her later. So they seem to have forgotten about that. So yeah, I did throw an air horn in your yard. Good job. I already told you that. But I did not TP their house. I hadn't been back to their house since the air horn. And I tried to tell him that I didn't do it, but I might as well have been talking to a brick wall, because all he's doing is just sitting there cussing at me and asking if I feel like a man. He's like, oh yeah, you've been harassing my daughter all the time, writing like suicide notes and making suicide threats. I'm like, what? Suicide threats? What? Are you kidding me? He's like, yeah, suicide threats. You know what, Jason? Kill yourself. Do it. No one would care. And in my mind, I was thinking, that's not true. No one would care. Really? Because I'll have you know that my cat loves me very much, and she would be very disappointed if I were to take my own life. And he starts cussing at me, and he's like, telling me to stop harassing his daughter, which I haven't even been doing. And he tells me, he's like, if I ever see you around my house again, I will call the cops on you. I'm like, oh yeah, that's funny, because I'm like 5 seconds away from calling the cops on you. And he's like, fuck you! I'm like, I love you too. And he keeps getting more and more pissed off. And eventually he realizes this kid's about to call the cops or something. I don't know what he realizes, but he realizes whatever he's doing isn't working. And he turns around to leave, and he goes back to his car. And as he's leaving to go to his car, I open the door, and I'm like, it's good to see what kind of man you are, Mr. Anonymous. And he turns around, and he puffs out his chest. He's like, and he salvages up the last remnants of his pride, and he's like, yeah, you too. And like in the most like masculine voice he can conjure up. And I'm like, have a good one. And he drives off. And looking back now, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. If I would have known he was coming, I would have slept naked. Alright? Like, I could just picture him going up to the window and being like, hey, you motherfucker! Oh, dude, cover up! Oh, dude, seriously? And you need to do some manscaping, alright? And now as I think back, I can just picture him driving my house with all this pent-up anger. Kill Jason! And a week after this, like, entire incident, like, I'm sitting at home alone again. I'm always home alone when this happens. I don't know why. And I'm sitting home alone, and I'm making dinner for myself, and I hear a knock at the door. So I go up to the door, and I answer, and there's a cop sitting there. And he's like, are you Jason Shaneyfeld? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm gonna need you to come with me. I'm like, whoa, what? And he's like, you know what this is about, right? I'm like, no. And he's like, your ex-girlfriend? I'm like, yeah, didn't they get TP'd like a week ago? And he's like, no. They got TP'd again last night. I'm gonna need you to come with me. I'm like, no, screw that. And I tell him that. I'm like, no, I didn't do it. And he's like, yeah, well, all the evidence seems to be pointing against you. I'm like, what evidence? You have their word, which frankly isn't that good. And like, evidence, yeah, show me the evidence and I'll come with you, alright? I know you have no evidence because it wasn't freaking me. He's like, oh, really? Wasn't you? Would you be willing to say that to a lie detector? As if that was like supposed to be like intimidate me into confessing. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to. Bring it out right here. We'll do it right now. And he's like, oh, well, we don't have one, but yeah. And he's like, alright, I'm gonna need you to come with me. I'm like, I don't even have shoes on. And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, they've placed a protection order against you, which means you can't ever own a gun, and if you ever get in trouble with the law, the penalties will be much severely worse. And I'm like, what? For a protection order? For suspected TPing? They can do that? I'm like, have they filed this yet? And he's like, no, they're about to though. And I'm like, can I go talk to these crazy people? And he's like, yeah, I can take you to their house right now if you come with me. I'm like, alright, let me get some socks and shoes on. And I go, and he's like, I'm just gonna have to take a quick look at your criminal record. As if, once again, that's trying to, like, intimidate me. I'm like, go for it, it's clear. And he pulls it up, and he's like, oh, there's an incident here for January 22nd, 2011. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, January 20th, what? Like, I was thinking, like, did I do something? Like, no. January 20th. what? And I asked him, like, well, what does it say I did? And he's like, oh, no, it doesn't say what you did. It just says that you had contact with the police on January 22nd. And I'm like, okay. So I get in his car, and he makes me sit in the back. Of course he makes me sit in the back. And then, like, and I'm driving there, and I'm sitting on this hard, stiff plastic seat, and, like, everyone who passed by is just, like, looking at me like I'm, like, this criminal scum. And even the cops treating me like that. And he's like, he spends the whole ride over there just telling me what an awful kid I am, and how I'm just gonna, like, end up in prison for the rest of my life. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And I keep insisting that it wasn't me, but this dude isn't buying a word of it. And we get to their house. Yeah, so we get to their house. That house, to be exact. They don't live there anymore, so I'm good. They moved, so it's actually safe for me to be here now. And we get to their house, and that house is just completely covered in toilet paper. Like, whoever TP'd them did a phenomenal job. Like, this thing was covered. I mean, I'm not kidding. Like, the trees in the front yard, the roof, the backyard, it was covered. It was a very thorough job. And they weren't home when me and the cop got there. So we were just walking around their yard, just examining this, like, masterpiece. And the cop is just, like, looking at this, and he's like, yeah, there's no way this was a one-man job. And this is the first time he'd seen it, too. And we were just walking around, just admiring this, and he was just like, wow. I can't state it enough. This was a masterful job, alright? And he calls Mr. Anonymous to come over, and so we can talk about this. And so we wait there, and January 22nd, it hits me. Oh yeah, I had my car broken into on January 22nd, and I reported it to the police. And it totally makes sense, because then, like, I had contact the police, and they put it on their record. Because the record only showed that I had contacted the police, never says what happened between us. So while we're waiting, I remember that. And I tell that to the cop, and he's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can tell, like, just standing there in their yard, like, that was when I won the cop's favor. I mean, just looking at this and just seeing how complete of a job this was, and just seeing the shocked look on my face, he could tell there was no way that I did it. And we're waiting here, and we're just, by this point, we're just both enjoying this together. Like, we're joking about it, like, just how amazing of a job this TPing is. And Mr. Anonymous pulls up then, and he gets out, and of course I'd have to go, like, sit in the car while the cop talks to him for a while. And he sits there, and they talk, and then it's my turn to get out. So I talk, and I tell him, I'm like, I don't want this protection order to go down. He's like, you know what, I really just want to stop being harassed and stop being bothered. And I'm like, well, you're talking to the wrong kid then, you know, like, there's not much I can do about that. Yeah, I get that, you want to stop being TP'd, but there's not really much I can do about that. It's not really in my control. And he's like, well, you know what, I'll be nice to you. I'll let this entire situation drop if you can look me straight in the eye and tell me you didn't do it. And I was like, alright, I didn't do it. And he's like, okay, okay. And I was like, and there's one more thing I want from you, Mr. Anonymous. I want you to tell me you're sorry for the incident before. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I did that, and I said some things I shouldn't have. And I was not satisfied by that apology. It was so generic, and I felt no feeling behind it, no meaning behind it. But whatever, I got what I asked for. I asked for an apology, and I got it. So there's not much I can do about that. And then after that, we both just kind of went our separate ways. And about half a year later, we talked about it. Me and his wife talked about it on my insistence, and we agreed that would be the end of it. And we both went our separate ways for good, and they moved to Maryland, so that's the end of the story.